we got to close out the show. But I wanted to bring something up that I thought has been overlooked in our American history. There's a great orator in the early days of the American Revolution. The American Revolution almost failed. And it largely failed because of ideological reasons, not military ones. There were many people that were completely disenfranchised and disenamored with the Continental Congress because they did not feel they were Americans. They felt that they were Englishmen. And they didn't like the idea of fighting against the king or taking up arms against the king. They recognized that they were in a difficult position. But they were not at a point that they felt that violence was necessary. They were not at a point where they thought that they would be able to stand up to the English army and the greatest navy in the world, the English Navy. There was an orator at the time by the name Thomas Paine. Great quote from Thomas Paine. Society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is a necessary evil, in its worst state, an intolerable. Thomas Paine wrote a number of what's called pamphlets. When I started writing, I started with pamphlets because I believed in the process. I believed in what they did. You basically make a short case. It's longer than a newspaper column, but it's not a book. It talks about certain subjects and why it's important, what the importance of them is. When Thomas Paine, and I've got it here. Let me get it here. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, which is not where this quote is from, is an important text because it saved the revolution. Once people heard what Thomas Paine had to say, they began to realize the tyranny of their own king. They began to realize, gee, we really have gone too far. And there were many people who were all for American Revolution and all for a new American country and that they just would back down when it came to push came to shove. There were troops in the streets at this point. This is why I've said we're not at that point yet, but we're headed there. The point at which Thomas Paine made his speech was there were troops in the streets, they were seizing guns from people, they were violating their rights on a regular basis and using the king's orders as an excuse with the fact that you weren't true Englishmen, you were just colonists. They were not given a right to vote, etc. There's a great quote about this. It comes from The American Crisis, which was a pamphlet that Thomas Paine wrote. It was appearing in the Pennsylvania Journal at the time. He says, "These are the times that try men's souls." And he didn't mean the difficulty that people would have in coming to the realization that the revolution was necessary. It was the fact that there was a dilemma, that the American citizens viewed themselves as Englishmen. It's the same dilemma we're faced with today. Now, I'm not advocating for this, okay? I'm telling you that we're faced with the same dilemma, though. At what point does a tyrannical American government become tyrannical where the vote doesn't count anymore? Where you don't have a say anymore? At what point? Where's the pivot point? And I'm not one to point it out. That's something that you and the individual has to decide. And this is something that was spoken about in American Crisis by Thomas Paine. It's something that you have to decide. And he talks about it. And he says, "The summer soldier and sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph." In other words, look, we're faced with a difficult situation. This was written at a time when the revolution was beginning to fail. Soldiers in the field were breaking up. They didn't have enough armaments. They didn't have enough food. And he wrote this to tell the people of America, who were now no longer Englishmen, yeah, this fight's going to be difficult. You're going to lose a lot of battles. You're going to have a lot of kids. Your own kids are going to die. But understand that when you took up arms against England, it was not going to be easily beaten. It was the most powerful nation in the world, like the United States is, by far. They had the equivalent of F-15 and nukes in 1787. And he says, tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. But we have this consolation with us. There's a good thing in this. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. When you do eventually win, and we will win, which is what the speech goes on to say, or the pamphlet goes on to say, you're going to have such a victory that it's going to resound for generations to come. Maybe you'll die. Maybe your kids will die. But your kids, and the kids that come after, the children that come after, the progeny, your future generations will live in freedom and will not have to fight England. You fight today so that they don't have to. Common sense, first version, hit the streets in January of 1776, 6 months before the Revolution began. The American crisis happened a little after. Common Sense sold 120,000 copies in the first 3 months. By the end of the Revolution, it was up over 500,000. If you don't think that's a lot, consider there were only 2 or 3 million people in the whole 13 colonies at the time. The estimated population of the colonies, excluding the Native Americans and African American natives, was only about 2.5 million. And it sold 500,000 copies. 30% of the population. And that's why I bring up, when I talk about Donald Trump and the Twitter and the hits on Tucker Carlson, it doesn't necessarily mean, one person could have bought 3 copies back in 1776, but you understand that it is an enormous amount of impact on a society. 20%, they estimate, of the colonists owned a copy of the booklet or had one available. In equivalent terms, that's about 60 million books sold. The number one bestseller only sells a couple million. Give you an idea. And they didn't have the internet. They didn't have mass media to sell it. It was word of mouth. Thomas Paine literally stood on a street corner handing these things out. Of course, they sold them in outlets, like book stands and newspaper stands. He'd only been in America for a year. He was brought to America by Benjamin Franklin. Thomas Paine published Common Sense anonymously. He didn't even ask for money. It was not something, I'm Thomas Paine, I've got these things to say. No. He was controversial. His role in the French Revolution was controversial. Not many people attended his funeral. Thomas Paine was banned from the United States. President Jefferson had to permit Paine to return from France for his final years. And let me read you something about what Thomas Jefferson said about Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was not loved. Thomas Paine was hated because of what he said. He said things in an unsavory way, in an unpleasant way, and words that they didn't want to hear. Sound familiar? Thomas Jefferson wrote this about Thomas Paine. Thomas Jefferson recognized his genius. He said, no writer has exceeded Paine in ease and familiarity of style, in perspicuity of expression, happiness of elucidation, in simple and unassuming language. Thomas Jefferson was a highly educated man. In this, he may be compared with Dr. Franklin, and indeed Common Sense for a while believed to have been written by Dr. Franklin himself, and published under the borrowed name of Paine, who came over with him from England. I want you to remember that. The people that have the greatest impact on society are not the ones that say things that everyone wants to hear. There are people that say things that people don't want to hear, like Donald Trump. Now, I'm not putting Donald Trump on the level of Thomas Paine. Lord knows I'm not. But understand this. You can't hold that against him, that he's saying things that are unpleasant. The people that speak truth, like Jordan Peterson does. These are the people that need to be remembered. These are the people that are the actual monuments to the freedom of speech. The ones who speak the truth regardless of the consequences. Not the people that do it like the Republican nominees on that stage who just wanted to appeal to a voter. That's not leadership. Thomas Paine is leadership. He said things people don't want to hear. You're going to die. Your people are going to die. Your kids are going to die. But you're going to live in freedom. As painful as this revolution is going to be, as painful it is to strike against your own government and your own leadership, because remember, England was the government at the time, it's going to benefit us in the long run. And it's not maybe going to benefit you at all. You might end up living in poverty and famine, death and disease, but your children will live freely. And the harder it is for you now, the greater the rewards will be. And I leave you with that thought for today. I'm out of time. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Now, don't forget, $3 donation gets you access to all 5 hours every week. And you also get videos to the show if you want to donate more. Details are at libertyneversleeps.com. I encourage you. Now, Wednesday's show will be a private show only for members. It'll come out Wednesday night. And then we do another public show this weekend, Labor Day weekend. Now, Labor Day weekend, Friday, I'll do a show. And then Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, I won't do a show. But Tuesday, when I come back from Labor Day, I'll do a show. Even though I normally do it on Monday, I'm taking Labor Day off. I'll do it Tuesday, okay? So we'll have, next week, we have a public show Tuesday, private show Wednesday, and public show again on the weekend, okay? Take care, folks. Have a good one.